Subscribe to StoryLab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Foundation. Derek Lancaster stood in his garage workshop at 5:47 a.m., the familiar weight of a steel wrench in his calloused hands. At 38, he'd built Lancaster Construction from nothing, a one-man operation that grew into the most reliable demolition and reconstruction company in 3 counties. His philosophy was simple: tear down what's broken, rebuild it stronger. The same philosophy he'd applied to his marriage with Candace. 15 years ago, Candace Branch was a struggling arts student drowning in debt when Derek met her at a downtown coffee shop. She was beautiful in that ethereal way: long auburn hair, green eyes that seemed to hold secrets, and a laugh that could disarm the toughest men. Derek, fresh from his father's funeral and inheriting a failing construction business, saw something in her that reminded him of hope. Their courtship was intense. Derek worked 18-hour days to stabilize the business while Candace painted in their tiny apartment. She'd wait up for him with dinner, her paint-stained fingers tracing patterns on his work-worn hands as she told him about her dreams of gallery showings and artistic recognition. "You're going to be something special," Derek would tell her, meaning every word. They married in a small ceremony 2 years later. Derek's brother Maurice Durham, a police detective, served as best man. Candace's sister Peggy Gill was maid of honor, though Derek noticed how Peggy's eyes followed Maurice with obvious interest that wasn't reciprocated. The early years were good. Derek's business flourished as his reputation for precision and reliability spread. Candace had Tyler when she was 25, then Emma 2 years later. She put her art on hold, claiming motherhood was her new canvas. Derek provided everything: a 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, 2 new cars, private schools for the kids, and enough financial security that Candace never had to work. In return, she managed their home with the same artistic flair she brought to everything else. Their house became the envy of the neighborhood, with perfectly curated decor and dinner parties that established Derek as a successful businessman. But Derek Lancaster was not a man who missed details. It was a skill that made him exceptional at construction, knowing when a foundation was compromised before the cracks appeared on the surface. The first crack appeared 6 months ago. Candace started attending art classes on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. She'd return home energized in a way Derek hadn't seen in years, her cheeks flushed and eyes bright. When he asked about her instructor, she'd give vague answers about exploring new techniques and rediscovering her passion. Derek believed in trust, but he also believed in verification. The second crack came when Tyler, now 10 and sharp as his father, mentioned that Mom's art teacher was really cool and had taken the whole class to a baseball game. When Derek asked Candace about it, she laughed it off, saying Tyler must have misunderstood. It was a museum trip. Children don't misunderstand baseball games. Derek began to pay attention. Candace's phone, once carelessly left around the house, was now permanently attached to her side. She'd smile at texts in a way that reminded Derek of their early dating days, except these smiles weren't for him. The third crack came during Tyler's school play 2 months ago. Derek arrived late from a job site to find Candace sitting with a man he didn't recognize. Tall, athletic build, easy smile, exactly the type of man who'd teach art classes to bored housewives. "Derek, this is Jake Dyer," Candace said, her voice carrying that same breathless quality it had when she was nervous. "He's the instructor I told you about." Jake Dyer's handshake was firm, his eye contact steady. He spoke with the confidence of a man who believed he was clever. "Your wife has tremendous talent, natural instincts." Derek smiled and nodded, playing the part of the grateful husband. But Derek Lancaster's handshakes served 2 purposes: greeting and evaluation. Jake Dyer's hands were soft, not the hands of a man who worked for a living. That night, Derek did what he did best. He investigated the foundation. Jake Dyer, 29, worked part-time at an art studio and lived in a downtown loft his wealthy parents had purchased. Never married, no steady employment history, and a social media presence full of photos with married women from his classes. Derek spent 3 weeks conducting surveillance with the methodical patience of a man who'd learned that rushing led to mistakes. He photographed Candace and Jake at restaurant across town, at his loft building, in her car at secluded parking spots. The foundation wasn't just cracked, it was completely compromised. Derek's plan began forming with the same precision he applied to demolition projects. You don't just swing a wrecking ball and hope for the best. You study the structure, identify the load-bearing elements, and remove them in exactly the right sequence. Some buildings came down all at once. Others collapsed slowly, piece by piece, until nothing remained but rubble. For Derek Lancaster, revenge was architecture. Chapter 2. The Discovery. The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening in late November. Derek arrived home early from a job site, the scent of winter rain still clinging to his work clothes. The house was unusually quiet. No sound of Tyler's video games or Emma's piano practice. He found Candace in their bedroom, freshly showered and dressed in the black dress he'd bought her for their anniversary. She was applying lipstick with the careful precision of a woman preparing for something important. "Going somewhere?" Derek asked, leaning against the doorframe with deceptive casualness. Candace startled, her hand jerking enough to smear the lipstick slightly. "Art class," she said, avoiding his eyes in the mirror. "Jake's doing a special session on abstract expression. At 7 p.m.? On a Tuesday." Sometimes creativity can't be confined to regular schedules. She turned to face him, and Derek saw the woman he'd married overlaid with someone he no longer recognized. "You wouldn't understand." The words hit Derek like a physical blow, not because they were cruel, but because they revealed how completely Candace had rewritten their history. She'd forgotten that Derek had encouraged her art, had converted their garage into a studio when Tyler was born, had framed her first painting and hung it in their living room. "Where are the kids?" Derek asked. "Peggy picked them up for a sleepover. They'll be back tomorrow." Derek nodded slowly. His sister-in-law's involvement added another layer to consider. "Have a good class." Candace seemed surprised by his easy acceptance. She kissed his cheek, a perfunctory gesture that carried no warmth, and left. Derek waited exactly 10 minutes before following. Jake Dyer's loft building was downtown, a converted warehouse in the Arts District. Derek parked across the street and settled in to wait. His phone buzzed with a text from Maurice. "Grab drinks with Peggy again. Think she's finally getting the hint I'm not interested." "Women, right?" Derek typed back. "Some people don't take hints. Sometimes you have to be direct." Through Jake's third-floor windows, Derek could see movement. Silhouettes against drawn curtains that told a story no art class ever would. Derek had expected this confirmation, but seeing it still felt like taking a sledgehammer to the chest. 15 years of marriage, 2 children, a life built brick by brick, all of it reduced to shadows against a window. He sat in his truck for 2 hours, watching his marriage end in someone else's apartment. When Candace finally emerged at 9:30, her hair slightly mussed and her lipstick gone, Derek was already home. He'd used his key to Jake's building, a skill learned from years of accessing construction sites, and left a small surprise. "How was class?" Derek asked when Candace walked in. "Inspiring," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Jake thinks I have real potential." "I'm sure he does." The next morning, Derek's phone rang at 6 a.m. Jake Dyer's panicked voice crackled through the speaker. "My car won't start, and there's something wrong with the electrical in my loft. The whole building's power grid is screwed up." Derek smiled as he sipped his coffee. "That's terrible, Jake. Have you called an electrician?" 3 of them. They all say it's the weirdest thing they've ever seen. Like someone with serious expertise sabotaged the whole system. "Well," Derek said, "sometimes these old buildings just fail without warning. Poor foundations." The power in Jake's building was restored that afternoon, but not before he'd missed a full day of work and had to pay for emergency electrical service. Derek's message was subtle but clear. "I can reach you anywhere." That evening, Derek sat Tyler and Emma down in the living room. At 10, Tyler had his father's sharp eyes and his mother's artistic sensitivity. 8-year-old Emma was pure energy with Derek's stubborn streak and an intuitive understanding of people that unsettled adults. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" Tyler asked without preamble. His directness reminded Derek painfully of himself at that age. "Why would you ask that?" Because you don't look at each other anymore, Emma said matter-of-factly. And Mom's been going to a lot of art classes. Derek felt a surge of pride at his children's perceptiveness, followed immediately by grief. They deserved better than the mess their mother was creating. Sometimes, Derek said carefully, people change. Sometimes they forget what's important. But you won't forget us, right? Emma's voice was small. Derek pulled both children close. Never. No matter what happens, you're the most important thing in my world. Over their heads, Derek saw Candace standing in the doorway. Her face was pale, but Derek couldn't tell if it was from guilt or fear. That night, Derek made a decision that would define everything that followed. He would not just defend his family. He would systematically destroy everyone who had betrayed it. Derek Lancaster did not forgive. He did not forget, and he did not lose. Chapter 3. The Manipulation. December brought the first real snowfall and Candace's escalating desperation. Derek's subtle campaign against Jake had expanded. Construction equipment breaking down at crucial moments, permit delays that cost him jobs, mysteriously canceled classes at the art studio. Jake was beginning to understand that dating Derek Lancaster's wife came with consequences. But Derek's real target wasn't Jake Dyer. His real target was the woman sitting across from him at the breakfast table, feeding their children cereal while planning to destroy their family. Derek, Candace said, her voice carefully modulated, "We need to talk." Tyler and Emma looked up from their bowls, sensing the tension that had become their new normal. "Kids, go get ready for school," Derek said gently. When they were alone, Candace folded her hands on the table like she was about to deliver a business presentation. "I want a divorce." Derek continued eating his toast, his expression unchanged. "Do you? This isn't working. We've grown apart. I think we both deserve to be happy." "And Jake Dyer makes you happy?" Candace's carefully rehearsed composure cracked slightly. "I don't know what you're talking about." Derek reached into his jacket pocket and placed a manila envelope on the table. 47 photographs, taken over 6 weeks. "I particularly like the one from last Tuesday. You're both very photogenic." Candace opened the envelope with trembling hands. Her face cycled through shock, fear, and finally anger. "You had me follow? I followed you myself. Saved money. You bastard." Her voice was low, venomous. "How long have you known?" "Long enough to prepare." "Prepare for what?" Derek smiled, and Candace visibly recoiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "For this conversation. For your lawyer. For what comes next." Candace gathered herself, straightening her shoulders. "Fine. We'll do this the civilized way. Split everything 50-50, joint custody, clean divorce." "No." "What do you mean, no?" "I mean you're not taking my children anywhere near Jake Dyer. You're not taking half of what I built. And you're certainly not going to waltz away from 15 years of marriage like it meant nothing." Candace's mask finally slipped completely. "You can't stop me, Derek. I'll take the kids and leave. I'll tell them what kind of man you really are." Derek leaned forward. "What kind of man am I, Candace?" "Cold. Controlling. Cruel." "Correct," Derek said pleasantly. "And you forgot patient. Very, very patient." Candace hired a lawyer that afternoon. Christy Perkins, known for her aggressive representation of wives in high-asset divorces. Derek hired no one. He'd been representing himself in business dealings for years, and divorce court was just another kind of negotiation. The custody evaluation began in January. Dr. Sandra Campos, a court-appointed psychologist, conducted interviews with the entire family. Derek presented as the stable provider, steady income, clear routines, deep involvement in his children's lives. Candace presented as the devoted mother seeking to escape an oppressive marriage. But Dr. Campos was thorough. She noticed that Tyler and Emma, while loving both parents, showed subtle signs of stress that seemed to spike when discussing their mother's new schedule. She noted Candace's inability to provide specific details about her children's interests, grades, or concerns. "Tell me about Tyler's best friend," Dr. Campos asked Candace during their private session. Candace hesitated. "He has several close friends." "What about Emma's favorite subject in school?" Another pause. "She enjoys all her classes." Derek, when asked the same questions, provided detailed answers about Tyler's struggle with math anxiety and his friendship with Marcus Young from next door. He discussed Emma's passion for science and her worry about her pet hamster's recent lethargy. The difference was stark. Derek knew his children. Candace knew the idea of her children. But Derek's real masterstroke came in February, when Candace made her critical error. Frustrated by the slow pace of divorce proceedings and Derek's refusal to settle, she decided to force his hand. She told Tyler and Emma that their father was making things difficult and that they might need to take a break from seeing him until everything was sorted out. She began canceling Derek's scheduled visits, claiming the children were too upset to see him. She coached them on what to say during their sessions with Dr. Campos. "Daddy scares us sometimes," Emma recited, the words clearly not her own. But Derek had taught his children something Candace had forgotten: the difference between truth and lies. Tyler, torn between loyalty to his mother and his own conscience, began keeping a journal. Emma, despite her mother's coaching, couldn't help asking Derek during their supervised visits why Mommy was so sad all the time. Derek documented everything. Every canceled visit, every coached statement, every sign that Candace was prioritizing her relationship with Jake over her children's stability. And then, in late March, Candace played her final card. "They don't even ask about you anymore," her text message read. "They want to change their last name." Derek stared at the message for a long time. His children, his Tyler and Emma, asking to give up the name he'd worked so hard to make something they could be proud of. Derek Lancaster was done being patient. He picked up his phone and called Maurice. "I need a favor, brother. Something that requires your particular skills." "What are you thinking, Derek?" "I'm thinking it's time for the foundation to collapse." By April, Derek had everything in place. Every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every document that would prove what Candace had become and what she'd done to their children. The court date was set for May 15th. Derek walked into that courtroom knowing exactly what was going to happen, while Candace sat with her lawyer, confident that her performance as the victimized wife would secure her everything she wanted. She had no idea that Derek had spent 6 months building her a trap so perfect, so complete, that she'd walked into it willingly. Derek Lancaster was about to tear down everything Candace had built on lies and show the world what was left when the foundation finally gave way. Chapter 4. The Battle Lines. May arrived with unseasonable heat, and the courthouse felt suffocating as Derek walked through the metal detectors. 6 months of preparation had led to this moment. Judge Ronald Young presiding over what Candace's lawyer had promised would be a straightforward custody hearing. Derek carried only a single briefcase and his phone. Candace arrived with Christy Perkins and 2 paralegals, their arms full of binders and documents designed to paint Derek as an unfit father. In the gallery, Maurice Durham sat in his detective suit, his presence both support and subtle intimidation. Peggy Gill sat behind Candace, shooting worried glances at Maurice, who continued to ignore her obvious interest. Tyler and Emma waited in the courthouse's child services room. Derek had insisted they not be subjected to the courtroom drama, though he knew they'd play a crucial role before this was over. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Ronald Young," the bailiff announced. Judge Young was known for 2 things: his hatred of games and his focus on children's welfare above all else. Derek had chosen this courthouse specifically for Young's reputation. "Be seated," Young said, reviewing the case file. "This is a custody hearing in the matter of Lancaster versus Lancaster. I've reviewed Dr. Campos's evaluation and the initial filings. Mrs. Perkins, you may present your opening statement." Christy Perkins stood with theatrical confidence. "Your Honor, my client Candace Lancaster is a devoted mother trapped in a marriage with a man who uses his children as weapons. Derek Lancaster has systematically isolated Mrs. Lancaster from her support systems, controlled her finances, and now seeks to punish her for finding the courage to leave by keeping her from her children." She gestured toward Derek. "Mr. Lancaster represents himself today because he believes his wealth and influence are enough to buy justice. He's wrong. Mrs. Lancaster seeks joint custody and fair division of marital assets, along with protection from a man who has shown he will use any means necessary to maintain control." Derek stood when Perkins finished. He wore his best suit, but still looked like what he was, a man who worked with his hands. Your Honor, Derek began, his voice calm and steady. 15 years ago, I married Candace Branch because I believed she was a woman of character. I was wrong. For the past 8 months, Mrs. Lancaster has been conducting an affair with Jake Dyer, a man she met in what she claimed were art classes. Candace whispered urgently to her lawyer, but Derek continued. Mrs. Lancaster has systematically alienated my children from me, coached them to lie to court-appointed psychologists, and prioritize a relationship with a lover over the welfare of Tyler and Emma. I have documentation of all of this, and I'm asking this court to award me full custody with supervised visitation for Mrs. Lancaster. Judge Young leaned forward. Those are serious allegations, Mr. Lancaster. I hope you have evidence to support them. I do, Your Honor. The next 2 hours were methodical destruction. Derek presented his photographs, documented the canceled visits, played recordings of phone calls where Candace admitted she was too busy to attend Emma's science fair or Tyler's baseball games. Dr. Campos testified about the inconsistencies in Candace's statements and the children's obvious distress when discussing their mother's new schedule. But Candace and her lawyer had prepared for this. Perkins painted Derek as a man so controlling that he'd hired private investigators to stalk his own wife. She brought character witnesses who testified to Candace's devotion as a mother and her fear of Derek's escalating behavior. Jake Dyer took the stand and denied any impropriety, claiming he was simply Mrs. Lancaster's art instructor and friend. He spoke convincingly about supporting her through a difficult marriage and helping her rediscover her independence. By afternoon, the case seemed evenly matched. Derek had evidence of the affair and Candace's neglect, but Perkins had successfully portrayed it as a man's vindictive response to his wife's attempt to leave. Judge Young called a recess. When we return, I'll hear final arguments and make my decision. During the break, Derek stepped outside where Maurice was waiting. How's it looking? Maurice asked. Like I planned, Derek said. They think they're winning. And are they? Derek smiled, that unpleasant smile again. Maurice, remember when we were kids and I'd spend weeks building those elaborate domino patterns? Yeah, you'd get pissed if anyone bumped them before you were ready. But when I was ready, watching them all fall down was beautiful. Maurice studied his brother's face. Derek, what aren't you telling me? That this was never about winning a custody hearing. This was about making sure Candace and Jake understand exactly what it cost to betray Derek Lancaster. When court resumed, Perkins delivered a passionate closing argument about protecting a mother's rights and not punishing women for leaving unhappy marriages. Derek stood for his final statement and looked directly at Candace. Your Honor, my wife believes she's won something today. She believes that destroying our marriage and alienating our children was worth it for whatever she thinks she has with Jake Dyer. He paused. She's about to discover she's wrong about that too. Judge Young was preparing to render his decision when Tyler's voice cut through the courtroom. Your Honor, I'd like to play a video from Mom's phone. The courtroom fell silent. No one had noticed the 10-year-old slip in from the children's room, holding Candace's iPhone in his small hands. Candace went white. Perkins jumped to her feet. Objection. This is highly irregular. But Derek just smiled as his son walked toward the judge's bench. Tyler, Judge Young said gently, how did you get your mother's phone? She left it on the table when she went to the bathroom, Tyler said. I know her passcode because she uses Emma's birthday. I found something I think you should see. Derek had spent months teaching his children about truth and consequences. Now Tyler was about to show everyone exactly what those lessons had produced. Chapter 5. The Revelation. Judge Young accepted the phone from Tyler with careful formality. Mrs. Perkins, do you object to reviewing whatever this child has found? Perkins looked to Candace, whose face had gone from white to green. Your Honor, this is clearly a violation of my client's privacy. There's no chain of custody, no authentication. Your Honor, Derek interrupted, I believe my son has found evidence relevant to these proceedings. If Mrs. Lancaster has nothing to hide, she shouldn't object to its review. Tyler stood beside the judge's bench, looking smaller than his 10 years, but speaking with the clarity of someone who'd made a difficult decision. Mom's been recording conversations, Tyler said, with Jake and with other people. I think she was planning to use them against Dad. Candace found her voice. Tyler, sweetheart, you don't understand. I understand more than you think, Mom. Judge Young held up a hand. Mr. Lancaster approached the bench. Mrs. Perkins, you as well. The three adults huddled while Tyler returned to his seat in the gallery. Derek could see Morris's proud smile and Peggy's growing horror as she began to understand what was happening. This is highly unusual, Judge Young said quietly. But if there are recordings relevant to this case, I need to hear them. Mrs. Perkins, does your client consent to review? Perkins whispered urgently with Candace, who finally nodded with obvious reluctance. Very well. We'll review this evidence. Judge Young's bailiff connected the phone to the courtroom's audio system. Tyler had already queued up the first recording, dated 3 weeks earlier. Candace's voice filled the courtroom. Jake, I don't care what it takes. Derek's going to fight the custody, so we need to make sure the kids are completely on my side before this goes to court. Jake's voice responded. How do you plan to do that? Easy. I tell them their father doesn't want to see them anymore. Kids believe what their mother tells them. By the time this goes to trial, they'll be so alienated from Derek that no judge will give him custody. What about the visitation he's getting now? I'll keep canceling. Say the kids are too upset. Derek's too stupid to realize I'm documenting his abandonment of them. The courtroom was dead silent. Derek watched Candace shrink into her chair as her own words condemned her. The second recording was even more damaging. Peggy, I need you to say Derek threatened me. Peggy's voice, clearly uncomfortable. Candace, I can't lie under oath. It's not lying. He did threaten me. Maybe not with words, but his whole attitude is threatening. You just need to interpret it that way. I don't know. Peggy, if you don't help me, Derek gets the kids. And you know what that means for your chances with Maurice. He'll never look at you if his brother hates your sister. The manipulation was breathtaking in its callousness. Derek glanced at Maurice, whose face had hardened into the expression he wore when arresting criminals. But Tyler wasn't finished. The third recording was the most recent, from just 2 days ago. Jake, after I get the kids and the money, we can start fresh. Derek will be destroyed, financially, emotionally, everything. He'll probably leave town. That's what men like him do when they lose. And the kids? What about them? Tyler's already asking questions, but I can handle him. Emma's too young to remember much about Derek anyway. Give it a year, and they'll think of you as their real father. What if Derek doesn't give up? What if he keeps fighting? Candace's laugh was cold. Then we destroy him completely. I've been documenting every time he raises his voice, every time he's late picking up the kids, every little thing that makes him look unstable. By the time I'm done, no one will believe anything Derek Lancaster says. The recording ended. The courtroom remained silent except for the sound of Candace's lawyer frantically taking notes. Judge Young looked at Tyler. Young man, how many recordings are on this phone? 17, Your Honor. I'll listen to all of them. Some are worse than what you just heard. Derek stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness. You may. Tyler Lancaster. Perkins objected immediately. Your Honor, calling a child to testify against his mother is emotional abuse. Overruled. Tyler, would you like to speak to the court? Tyler walked to the witness chair with steady steps. Derek felt a surge of pride, so intense it nearly brought tears to his eyes. Tyler, Derek said gently, why did you bring your mother's phone to court today? Because Mom's been lying about you and lying about us. What has she told you about me? That you don't want to see Emma and me anymore. That you're trying to take us away from her because you're mean. That we should be afraid of you. And what do you think about that? Tyler looked directly at his mother. I think Mom forgot that kids have eyes and ears. I see how sad Emma gets when Dad can't come to her recitals because Mom cancels them. I hear Mom talking to Jake about how to handle us. Derek's next question was crucial. Tyler, who do you want to live with? I want to live with Dad. Emma does too, but she's scared to say so because Mom gets angry when we ask about you. Candace finally broke. Tyler, please. You don't understand. I'm trying to protect you. Tyler turned to her with eyes far too old for his 10 years. Protect us from what, Mom? From the dad who comes to every baseball game when you let him? From the dad who helps with homework and reads bedtime stories? Or are you protecting us from finding out that you've been lying about everything? Judge Young intervened gently. Tyler, that's enough. You can return to your seat. But Tyler wasn't finished. Your Honor, I want to change my last name. The courtroom stirred. This was what Candace had claimed in her text message. Oh, Judge Young said. And what would you like it to be? Derek felt his heart stop. I want to keep Lancaster. It's my dad's name, and I'm proud of it. Mom told people Emma, and I wanted to change it, but that's another lie. We want to stay Lancaster because our dad is Derek Lancaster, and Derek Lancaster never lies to us. Chapter 6, The Judgment. Judge Young called for a 30-minute recess to review the additional recordings and consider the testimony. Derek used the time to take Tyler and Emma to the courthouse cafeteria, where he bought them both ice cream and tried to process what had just happened. Dad, Emma said, her small voice barely audible. Are we in trouble for the phone thing? Derek knelt to her level. No, sweetheart. You and Tyler did the right thing. Sometimes telling the truth is hard, but it's always right. Is Mom going to be mad at us? Tyler answered before Derek could. Mom's been mad at us for months, Em. At least now, everyone knows why. Derek pulled both children close. Through the cafeteria window, he could see Candace and her lawyer in intense conversation. Across the hallway, Maurice was on his phone, probably running background checks on Jake Dyer and anyone else who might be relevant. Kids, Derek said carefully, whatever the judge decides today, I want you to know that you're both braver than any adults I know. When they returned to the courtroom, Judge Young looked like a man who'd heard enough lies for one lifetime. I've reviewed all 17 recordings, he began. I've also reviewed Dr. Campos's evaluation, the evidence presented by both parties, and Tyler's testimony. He looked directly at Candace. Mrs. Lancaster, in 30 years on this bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated campaign to alienate children from a parent. Your recordings reveal not just adultery, but systematic emotional manipulation of your own children. Candace started to speak, but Judge Young continued. You coach your children to lie to court-appointed psychologists. You attempted to suborn perjury from your sister. You've used your children as weapons in what should have been a straightforward divorce proceeding. He turned to Derek. Mr. Lancaster, while I don't condone vigilante behavior, you've presented clear evidence that Mrs. Lancaster is unfit for custody. Judge Young's decision was swift and comprehensive. Full custody is awarded to Derek Lancaster. Mrs. Lancaster will have supervised visitation for 2 hours every other Saturday, supervised by court personnel for a period of 1 year. After that year, custody arrangements may be reviewed based on Mrs. Lancaster's demonstrated change in behavior. Candace's gasp was audible throughout the courtroom. Furthermore, Judge Young continued, I'm ordering an investigation into Mrs. Lancaster's fitness as a parent. The recordings suggest possible emotional abuse of the children. He looked at Tyler and Emma. Children, you'll continue living with your father. You'll continue your current schools and activities. Your mother loves you, but she needs to learn how to show that love in healthy ways. Perkins tried one last gambit. Your Honor, my client requests child support and alimony. Denied. Mrs. Lancaster will receive no financial support from Mr. Lancaster. She has demonstrated that her priority is her relationship with Mr. Dyer, not her children's welfare. Derek felt a moment of pure triumph, followed immediately by something darker. This was justice, but it wasn't revenge. Candace would still be in their lives, still be able to influence Tyler and Emma during those supervised visits. Derek Lancaster's revenge would be more complete than any court could provide. As they left the courthouse, Maurice caught Derek's arm. That was beautiful, brother. But I know that look. What are you really planning? Derek glanced back at Candace, who was crying dramatically into Perkins's shoulder while Jake Dyer hovered nearby, looking like a man who'd just realized he'd hitched himself to a sinking ship. Nothing illegal, Maurice. Nothing you'd have to arrest me for. Derek, justice happened in there, Derek said, nodding toward the courthouse. But consequences happen out here. That evening, Derek sat with Tyler and Emma in their living room, their real living room, in the house Candace had lost the right to claim. They ordered pizza and watched movies, and for the first time in months, Derek's children looked truly relaxed. But Derek's phone was busy. Calls to contractors, suppliers, business associates. The Lancaster construction network was vast, and Derek's reputation meant something in 3 counties. By morning, Jake Dyer would discover that his part-time art instructor position had been eliminated due to budget constraints. The studio owner, who owed Derek's company a significant favor, explained that they simply couldn't afford to keep instructors who created drama in the community. Candace would find that her Tuesday and Thursday art classes were permanently canceled. But that was just the beginning. Derek Lancaster had spent 6 months learning everything about Jake Dyer. His wealthy parents, his trust fund, his comfortable life built on other people's money and other people's wives. All of that was about to change, because Derek had discovered something interesting about the Dyer family fortune. It was built on a foundation every bit as compromised as Derek's marriage had been. And Derek Lancaster was very, very good at identifying structural weaknesses. Chapter 7. The Foundation Crumbles. 3 days after the custody hearing, Jake Dyer's comfortable world began its methodical collapse. Derek had learned that Jake's trust fund came from his grandfather's construction company, a business built on corners cut and safety standards ignored. The kind of business Derek despised. What Jake didn't know was that his grandfather's company had used substandard materials in a renovation project Derek's company had been hired to fix 5 years earlier. Derek had kept detailed records of every code violation, every dangerous shortcut, every piece of evidence that could destroy the Dyer family's carefully constructed reputation. Derek made 3 phone calls on Thursday morning. The first was to Channel 7 News, specifically to investigative reporter Nancy Parks, who'd been looking for a story about construction corruption. The second was to the State Building Commission, who would be very interested in learning about decades-old safety violations that had never been properly reported. The third was to Marcus Young, Tyler's friend's father, who happened to be Judge Ronald Young's nephew and worked for the Insurance Fraud Division of the State Attorney General's office. By Friday afternoon, the Dyer construction scandal was the lead story on every local news channel. Photos of Jake's grandfather cutting ribbons on buildings that had later failed inspections. Documents showing bribes paid to city inspectors. Records of injuries covered up and lawsuits settled quietly. Jake's parents, Carl and Bernice Dyer, found themselves facing criminal investigations for fraud and racketeering. The trust fund that had supported their son's leisurely lifestyle was frozen pending the investigation. Jake went from comfortable art instructor to unemployed scandal magnate in 72 hours. But Derek's real masterpiece was what he did to Candace. Candace had always been proud of her social status, her reputation as the perfect wife and mother. She'd built her identity around being envied by other women and desired by their husbands. Derek systematically destroyed that identity. He arranged for copies of the courtroom recordings to be sent to every member of Candace's social circle. Her book club, her yoga class, her neighborhood friends. Everyone heard her voice describing how she planned to manipulate her own children and destroy her husband. The response was swift and brutal. Candace found herself uninvited from gatherings, unfriended on social media, whispered about in grocery stores. The woman who'd once been the center of attention became a pariah. Her sister Peggy, horrified by the revelation of Candace's manipulation attempts, cut off all contact. When Maurice finally called Peggy to check on her, she broke down crying and begged him to understand that she'd never known what Candace was really like. "I thought she was unhappy," Peggy told Maurice over dinner, their first real date after months of her pursuing him. "I had no idea she was evil." Derek's surveillance network kept him informed of every development. Jake had moved back in with his parents, who were now facing bankruptcy and criminal charges. Candace had been forced to take a job at a department store, her first employment in 15 years. The art classes that had started everything were a memory. The loft where she'd conducted her affair had been repossessed. The dream of starting fresh with Jake had died the moment the cameras started rolling outside the Dyer family home. But Derek wasn't finished. On a Tuesday evening in late June, Derek received a call from an unlisted number. "Derek." Candace's voice was smaller than he'd ever heard it. I need to talk to you. We communicate through the court-supervised visitation. Nothing else. Please. 5 minutes. I'll come to your house. Derek considered this. You have 3 minutes. Say what you need to say. 20 minutes later, Candace stood on the porch of the house she'd once called home. She looked exhausted, thinner than Derek had ever seen her hair unkempt, wearing clothes that screamed discount store rather than boutique. I made a mistake, she said without preamble. Derek said nothing. I threw away everything good in my life for... She gestured helplessly. For nothing. Jake won't even return my calls now. His parents blame me for the investigation. The investigation into their criminal activity? Derek asked mildly. I can't imagine why they'd blame you for that. Candace's eyes sharpened. You did this. All of it. The news story, the investigation, everything. I did nothing illegal, but you orchestrated it. Derek stepped onto the porch, closing the door behind him. He didn't want Tyler and Emma to hear this conversation. Candace, he said, his voice deadly quiet. You recorded yourself planning to destroy me. You manipulated our children. You tried to steal everything I'd built. What did you think would happen? I thought. She started, then stopped. I don't know what I thought. You thought Derek Lancaster was weak. You thought I'd roll over and accept whatever you decided our family was worth. You were wrong. Candace's composure finally cracked completely. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Derek. I know I can't undo what I did, but maybe we could. No. The single word hit her like a physical blow. There's no we, Candace. There's never going to be a we again. You chose Jake Dyer over your family. Now you get to live with that choice. But the children see you every other Saturday for 2 hours. That's what you earned. That's what you deserve. Candace was crying now, and Derek felt nothing. The woman who'd once been able to move him with a tear now left him completely cold. Derek, please. I know you're angry, but I'm not angry, Candace. Anger is what you feel when someone disappoints you unexpectedly. You've been disappointing me for 8 months. Now I'm just done. Derek turned to go back inside, then paused. Oh, and Candace? If you ever try to manipulate Tyler and Emma again, if you ever coach them to lie or try to turn them against me, I will destroy whatever life you manage to build for yourself. And next time, I won't need a courtroom to do it. The threat was delivered in the same tone Derek used to discuss construction schedules, but Candace understood perfectly. As Derek closed the door, he heard her car start and drive away. Through the living room window, he could see Tyler and Emma playing a board game, safe and happy in the home she tried to take from them. Derek Lancaster had won completely, but somehow victory fell hollow. Chapter 8, The Reckoning. 6 months after the custody hearing, Derek's life had settled into a new rhythm. Tyler and Emma thrived under his sole custody, their grades improving and their natural humor returning. The supervised visits with Candace had become routine, 2 hours every other Saturday, where she tried desperately to reconnect with children who were polite but distant. Derek watched these visits from the courthouse waiting area, noting how his ex-wife had aged years and months. Her job at the department store barely covered rent on a small apartment across town. Jake Dyer had disappeared entirely, rumored to be living with relatives in another state while his parents faced federal prosecution. The local news had moved on to other scandals, but the damage to the Dyer family was permanent. Their construction empire had collapsed, taking Jake's trust fund and his parents' reputation with it. Derek should have felt satisfied. He'd gotten everything he'd wanted. His children, his house, his business, and complete victory over the people who'd betrayed him. Instead, he felt empty. The realization hit him on a cold December evening as he sat in his workshop, supposedly maintaining his tools, but really just staring at nothing. Tyler was upstairs doing homework. Emma was practicing piano, and Derek was alone with the understanding that revenge, no matter how complete, couldn't rebuild what had been destroyed. His phone buzzed with a text from Maurice. Peggy and I are engaged. Wedding in June. Want you to be my best man again. Derek smiled despite himself. His brother had found happiness with someone who deserved it. Peggy had proven herself different from her sister, horrified by Candace's behavior and committed to making amends for her family's role in the destruction. Derek typed back, "Congratulations." Of course I'll stand with you. Another text arrived immediately. There's something else. Can I come over? Need to talk to you. An hour later, Maurice sat in Derek's kitchen, still wearing his detective's badge, but looking uncomfortable. What's on your mind? Derek asked. Tyler and Emma. Derek's protective instincts flared. What about them? They're good kids, Derek. Great kids. But they're carrying something heavy. Such as? Maurice chose his words carefully. Emma asked Peggy last week if it was her fault that Mommy couldn't live with them anymore. Derek felt like he'd been punched. What did Peggy tell her? The truth. That it wasn't her fault that adults sometimes make bad choices, and that she's loved by everyone who matters. Good. Derek. Maurice paused. Tyler asked me something else. He wanted to know if you were sad that Mommy was gone. Derek didn't respond. I told him you were probably sad about some things, but glad about others. But he's 10 years old, and he's watching his father carry around this anger like it's a badge of honor. I'm not angry anymore. No, Maurice agreed. You're not. That's the problem. Derek looked at his brother. Meaning you've turned yourself into a machine. You function perfectly. Great father, successful businessman, pillar of the community. But you don't feel anything anymore. And kids notice that. Derek stood and walked to the window overlooking his backyard. The swing set he'd built for Tyler and Emma stood empty in the December cold. She destroyed everything, Maurice. Our marriage, our family, our children's security. She was willing to sacrifice Tyler and Emma's relationship with their father for a man she barely knew. How am I supposed to forgive that? I'm not asking you to forgive her. I'm asking you to stop letting her poison what you have left. Derek turned back to his brother. What do you mean? I mean, Candace Lancaster was a selfish, manipulative woman who made terrible choices. But she's gone now. You won. The only person still allowing her to hurt your family is you. The words hit Derek harder than he'd expected. Maurice continued. Tyler and Emma love you completely. They feel safe with you. They trust you. They're proud to be your children. But they also feel responsible for the fact that their father has turned himself into stone. I'm not. When's the last time you laughed with them? When's the last time you seemed genuinely happy about anything? You become so focused on making sure they never get hurt again that you've forgotten to show them what happiness looks like. Derek sank back into his chair. For 6 months, he'd been so focused on protecting his children from their mother's manipulation that he hadn't considered how his own emotional shutdown might affect them. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that the best revenge against Candace isn't destroying her life. It's building a life so good that her absence becomes a blessing instead of a wound. Derek thought about this. And how do I do that? Maurice smiled. You start by being Derek Lancaster, the father, instead of Derek Lancaster, the avenging angel. You show Tyler and Emma that their dad is more than just the man who won their custody case. That night, Derek lay in bed thinking about his brother's words. He'd spent so much energy on revenge that he'd forgotten about recovery. He'd won the war, but lost something essential in the process. The next morning, Derek made a decision that would have surprised the man he'd been 6 months earlier. He called Candace. Derek. Her voice was cautious, uncertain. I want to modify the custody arrangement. Silence. I want to give you more time with the children. What? Derek had spent the night thinking about Tyler and Emma, about what they needed to become healthy adults. They needed to see their father as someone capable of mercy, not just justice. Unsupervised visits. Every other weekend, Friday evening to Sunday afternoon. No changes to primary custody, but the kids need to have a real relationship with their mother. Derek, I don't understand. Why would you? Because Tyler and Emma deserve a mother who's fighting to be better, not just a cautionary tale about betrayal. He paused. But understand this, Candace. This is their gift to you, not mine. You get one chance to prove you can put them first. If you ever try to manipulate them again or use them against me, I'll make sure you never see them again. And this time, I won't need a courtroom to do it. Derek hung up before she could respond. Later that evening, Derek called Tyler and Emma into the living room. Dad, Tyler said before Derek could speak, are you okay? You seem different today. Derek looked at his son. Smart, intuitive, carrying burdens no 10-year-old should have to carry. I've been thinking about some things, Derek said. about how to be the kind of father you both deserve. Emma climbed onto his lap. You're already the best dad in the world. Derek felt something crack inside his chest. Not breaking, but opening. For the first time in months, he felt genuinely, completely happy. Well, he said, let's see if we can make it even better. Chapter 9. New Foundations. 1 year later, Derek stood in his workshop on a Saturday morning, teaching Tyler how to use a level while Emma painted designs on small wooden birds they'd cut together. The supervised visits with Candace had evolved into regular weekends, and while the relationship would never be what it once was, the children had their mother back in a meaningful way. Candace had changed. The woman who'd once taken everything for granted now fought for every minute with her children. She'd enrolled in counseling, found a better job, and slowly began rebuilding her life around being the mother Tyler and Emma deserved rather than the woman she'd wanted to be. Derek watched his children work and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Dad, Tyler said, checking his level carefully, Marcus's mom wants to know if you want to come to their barbecue next weekend. Sarah Young, Marcus's mother, and Judge Ronald Young's sister-in-law have been finding excuses to invite Derek to family gatherings for months. She was kind, intelligent, and shared Derek's belief that children should be the center of their parents' world. What do you think? Derek asked Tyler. I think you should go. Emma thinks so too. Emma looked up from her painting. Mrs. Young makes really good cookies. And she looks at you the way Uncle Maurice looks at Aunt Peggy. Derek laughed, a sound that had become more frequent over the past year. Is that right? Yep. Plus, she's pretty and she's nice to us, and she doesn't try to pretend you don't exist like some of the other moms do. The wisdom of children was often brutally honest. All right, Derek said, I'll go to the barbecue. That afternoon, during Candace's visit with the children, Derek received an unexpected phone call. Derek Lancaster. The voice was unfamiliar, nervous. Speaking. This is Jake Dyer. Derek's grip tightened on the phone. What do you want, Jake? I want to apologize. Derek said nothing. I know that probably doesn't mean much coming from me, but I wanted you to know that I understand what I did was wrong. Not just the affair, but everything else. Everything else? Encouraging Candace to fight you for custody. Helping her plan to alienate the kids from you. I knew it was wrong, but I was selfish and I thought I was in love, and I convinced myself that you were the bad guy. Derek walked outside, not wanting Tyler and Emma to overhear this conversation. Where are you now, Jake? Living with my aunt in Oregon. My parents. Well, you know what happened to my parents. Derek did know. The federal investigation had resulted in criminal convictions and prison sentences. The family's wealth was gone, their reputation destroyed. I'm working construction now, Jake continued. Ironic, right? Learning to actually build things instead of just tearing them down. Why are you calling me? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Because I wanted you to know that what you did, it was right. I deserved everything that happened to me. And Candace deserved what happened to her too. Candace is doing better now. I know. She sent me updates sometimes. About Tyler and Emma. About her job. About trying to be better. I'm glad. Another pause. Derek, I know I have no right to ask this, but I need to know. Do Tyler and Emma know about me? Do they know what I did to their family? Derek considered the question. They know their mother had a relationship with someone else. They know that relationship ended their parents' marriage. They don't know the details, and they don't need to. Thank you for that. I didn't do it for you, Jake. I did it for them. I know, but thank you anyway. Derek was about to hang up when Jake spoke again. Derek, you were right about foundations. I learned that working construction, if the foundation is rotten, nothing you build on top of it will last. I had a rotten foundation, and everything I built came down. And now I'm learning to build better ones. Derek ended the call and stood in his backyard, thinking about foundations and second chances and the difference between justice and revenge. He'd spent months tearing down everyone who'd betrayed him, and it had been satisfying in its way. But the real victory wasn't their destruction. It was what he'd built in place of what they'd destroyed. Tyler called from the workshop. Dad, come see what Emma made. Derek walked back inside to find his daughter holding up a painted wooden bird, bright yellow with blue wings. It's beautiful, sweetheart. What kind of bird is it? It's a phoenix, Emma said matter-of-factly. Mrs. Chun taught us about them in our class. They burn up completely, and then they build themselves new from the ashes. Derek knelt beside his daughter, studying her artwork. And they're stronger when they come back? Much stronger, because they know what fire feels like, so they're not scared of anything anymore. Tyler looked up from his woodworking. That's like us, isn't it, Dad? Like our family. Derek pulled both children close, feeling the weight of everything they'd survived together. Yes, he said, that's exactly like us. Outside, Derek could hear Candace's car pulling into the driveway to return Tyler and Emma from their visit. She would take them for pizza and to a movie, then bring them home by 8 o'clock, as she had every other weekend for months. She would be polite to Derek, grateful for the opportunity to be in her children's lives, and careful never to overstep the boundaries he'd established. Because Candace Lancaster had learned what Derek had always known. Some foundations, once broken, could never be fully repaired. But sometimes, if you were very careful and very committed, you could build something new on the ruins of what had been destroyed. And sometimes, what you built was stronger than what had come before. Derek Lancaster had torn down everything that was broken in his life. He demolished the lies, exposed the betrayals, and removed every threat to his children's welfare. Now, finally, he was ready to build something beautiful in its place. The revenge was complete. The recovery had begun, and Derek Lancaster never forgot and never forgave. But he had learned that sometimes the best vengeance was living so well that your enemy's destruction became irrelevant. Tyler and Emma were safe. They were happy. They were his. Everything else was just ruins in the rearview mirror.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.